Imagine realizing that every random coincidence in your life, right? Like your totally boring office job, maybe a chronic illness you had, or even the exact commercial spaceship you booked for a routine flight. Imagine finding out all of that was actually calculated by a rogue artificial intelligence.
Yeah, and calculated specifically to trigger a literal magical apocalypse. It's
Mhm.
just a wild concept.
It really is. And that is the terrifying reality that 4 players discovered in just a single session of a tabletop role-playing game. So, for you listeners tuning in, today we are taking a deep dive into an incredibly dense and honestly masterfully executed session. We are looking at session 1 of a Mongoose Traveler 2nd Edition campaign, and it's called Vault Hunter's Spinward Marches.
Right, and we are pulling from a really fantastic stack of primary sources to do this deep dive. We've got the raw session transcripts, a highly detailed narrative summary titled Escape from Jewell, the player's intricate character background documents, and even a master transcript correction guide.
Oh, the correction guide is fascinating.
Yeah, the campaign's archivist uses it to keep all this sprawling lore aligned, which is definitely needed here.
Definitely. So, if you love examining that precise moment where carefully crafted character backstories violently collide with the spontaneous chaos of a tabletop game, well, this deep dive is for you. Because we aren't just looking at the plot here. We are dissecting the player choices, the game design architecture behind the scenes, and really how a desperate escape from a planetary blockade exposed the darkest secrets of 4, seemingly unrelated people.
The contrast between who these characters appear to be and who they actually are is, well, is what makes this session a masterclass in roleplay, I think. You have this social media influencer, a remarkably mundane office worker, a retired scout, and a space merchant.
Such a random group.
Right. And somehow this eclectic group finds themselves stuffed into stolen Imperial Navy uniforms, sweating through a security checkpoint, basically trying to steal a spaceship.
And the premise itself is a total pressure cooker. So the planet Jewell is locked down under a total Imperial naval blockade. The party's personal ships are impounded. So staying on the planet means capture or death, basically.
Yeah, they really have no choice.
Exactly. So they acquire these Imperial Navy disguises from a black market tailor and decide to pull a classic surprise inspection bluff to infiltrate a highly secure industrial complex. But what really fascinates me is the player character divide here. The players are executing a heist, but the characters are leveraging these deep, hidden traumas to actually pull it off. Like, look at Sakura Helliston.
Oh, Sakura is a great example.
Right. To the public on her homeworld of Veros Tertius, she is a high-profile influencer. She curates this completely shallow, harmless aesthetic.
But then you look at her character sheet, and it tells a completely different story. Privately, she is an MMA fighter. But more importantly than that, she grew up in a society built on managed, systemic corruption.
Yeah, she knows how the game is played.
Exactly. She intimately understands how institutions lie to the public, and she uses that influencer persona as, like, active camouflage. She's playing someone who is playing someone else.
And then there is Leonardo. I mean, the contrast with him is even sharper, I think. He is playing the role of a hyper-boring, paperwork-obsessed corporate drone.
The ultimate middle manager type.
Totally. But his background documents reveal he is actually a highly conditioned, genetically modified sleeper agent from a tech level 15 world. He's part of a covert faction called the Silver Group. Like, he was literally bred for espionage and counter-surveillance.
Yet, despite having a genetically engineered spy and a corruption-savvy fighter, their infiltration plan is structurally flawed from the very moment they step up to the front doors.
It really is a disaster.
It is. Because they are attempting to walk into a high-security Tech Level 13 facility, and they make a series of just glaring tactical errors right out of the gate.
We should really pause and talk about tech levels here, or TL, because that is a core mechanic in the Traveler universe that drives this entire failure. A Tech Level 13 facility means gravity control, advanced biometrics, highly sophisticated AI networks.
Top-tier security.
Yeah, and what do our players bring with them? They bring civilian-grade, Tech Level 8 to 12 data tablets. It is basically the equivalent of trying to bluff your way into the Pentagon server room while holding, like, a cracked iPad and a cassette player.
That is exactly what it is. It creates an immediate mechanical dissonance for the security systems. The hardware just doesn't match the uniforms at all. And then Sakura, who is trying to play the part of a strict commanding Imperial officer, she performs a military salute completely wrong.
Which, I initially thought was just a player forgetting how to role-play a soldier. But looking closer at the transcript, it is actually a deliberate choice.
Right, it's character-driven.
Yeah, Sakura is an influencer and an MMA fighter. She's not a military graduate, so of course her salute is sloppy. And they have absolutely no biometrics, no retina scans, no Imperial IDs, just the stolen fabric on their backs.
So naturally, the bluff fails almost immediately.
Instantly.
But the game master doesn't just sound the alarms and have guards open fire, which a lot of GMs might do. Instead, the facility's security doors lock, and the party is trapped in a 3-minute decontamination chamber with flashing lights and rushing wind.
That deacon chamber scene is wild. Why do you think the GM went that route instead of just initiating combat?
Well, that deacon chamber is a brilliant application of a tabletop concept called failing forward. Like I said, a lesser game master might have just said, you failed your deception roll, roll for initiative, combat starts. But here, the GN uses the environment to build excruciating narrative tension.
Yeah, it really slows things down in a terrifying way.
Exactly. By physically trapping the characters behind clear barriers, they create a period of maximum vulnerability.
I was reading that scene, and it felt way less like a security measure and more like a psychological pressure cooker. The GM is intentionally isolating them. They can't fight, they can't run away, and they can't talk their way out. They just have to stand there and watch the security personnel on the other side of the glass realize they're absolute frauds.
That is exactly the point. It shifts the power dynamic entirely away from the players. It gives the facility's bureaucracy time to actually verify their fake cover, which forces the tension to peak organically. The players have 3 minutes of real-world time to sit in their failure and realize just how out of their depth they are.
But what is so brilliant here is that when those deacon doors finally slide open, the players aren't met with handcuffs.
No, they aren't.
They are met with a negotiation. The bluff completely falls apart, but the Navy captain waiting for them inside the office isn't barking orders for their execution. She sits them down for this surprisingly calm, intellectual sparring match.
The captain represents a deeply nuanced, factional gray area in this universe. She tells them directly that she knows exactly who they are. She literally has their dossiers on her desk.
Which is terrifying for the players, I'm sure.
Oh, completely. But she also reveals that she is receiving conflicting, illogical orders from shadowy groups that are basically treating the Imperial Navy like their own personal toy. She wants answers from the players just as much as she wants to detain them.
I have to admit, when I first read this section of the transcript, I was pretty confused. Because usually in these sprawling sci-fi settings, the Imperium is just the monolithic big bad. You expect the Imperial captain to be a brick wall.
Right, just a faceless enemy.
Yeah, but she seems just as trapped by the bureaucracy as the players are. She's complaining about things like the Shadow Corps and the Shadow Court. It's really interesting.
Well, if we look at how Traveler handles world building, institutions are almost never monoliths. They're always layered with competing secret agendas. The captain values order, sure, but her resentment at being manipulated makes her a potential wild card. This interaction serves as sort of thesis statement for you listeners in this campaign. Trusting the uniform is a mistake.
And she proves that by dropping some massive lore on the table right then and there. She brings up something called the Bancroft Incident, which is a heavily redacted event on a distant moon from a decade ago.
And this ties directly into one of the characters, right?
Yes. It directly connects to Ruki, the retired scout valedictorian who goes by the alias Milt. According to his backstory, Ruki discovered a hidden pirate base on Bancroft, got fired upon by an unmarked ship, and then had his official scout logs entirely wiped by this covert organization, the Shadow Court.
And the captain doesn't just stop at Ruki. She pivots to Milton, the space merchant of the group, and she flags him as a complete black hole of information.
A black hole.
Yeah, in the eyes of Imperial intelligence, having a messy file is totally normal. But having absolutely zero data, no digital footprint whatsoever, that is a massive red flag. It implies deliberate, high-level erasure that only a few organizations in the entire galaxy can even pull off.
So the GM is using this NPC not as a direct enemy, but as a mirror to force the players to look at their own terrifying backstories.
A narrative tool, essentially.
Exactly. But just as the captain is demanding they cooperate to figure out who is pulling everyone's strings, the shadowy forces she was just complaining about decide they are done waiting. The conversation doesn't end with a neat agreement. It ends with the office walls literally exploding inward.
The transition from political intrigue to a high-octane tactical firefight is brutal, and it's instantaneous. Black armored operatives, essentially men in black, and these combat drones just swarm the facility. The tension of the conversation is completely shattered by shrapnel and blue plasma fire.
And this is where the character sheets really dictate the action in such a cool way. A typical player in a firefight just starts shooting the bad guys. Right. Roll to hit, do damage.
Right, standard combat protocol.
But Leonardo's conditioning instantly kicks in. He spots a drone plugging into a terminal to download classified data. And instead of shooting the drone, Leonardo uses his laser pistol to slice through a newly installed power conduit in the ceiling.
It is a masterful tactical decision.
Yes.
And it perfectly reflects his Tech Level 15 sleeper agent background. By cutting the power conduit, he short-circuits the local mainframes and severs the drone's connection entirely, which halts the data transfer completely.
He attacks the infrastructure, not the symptom. The mechanics perfectly match the roleplay here. He isn't a soldier, he's an intelligence asset, so his instinct is systemic disruption.
Precisely. And simultaneously, we see Sakura's core trauma dictate her actions during the ambush as well. When the explosives breach the room, instead of diving for cover to save herself, she throws herself over the captain to shield her from the blast.
Which, from a pure gameplay perspective, seems totally irrational. I mean, the captain was just threatening to arrest them. Why risk your character's life for an NPC who is technically your jailer?
You really have to look at Sakura's background document to understand it. She suffers from deep survivor's guilt. She lost her childhood friend Marcus to a chronic illness that she herself survived. And that trauma forged this fierce, almost irrational protective instinct in her. She physically cannot stand by and watch someone be taken out if she has the power to intervene, regardless of what their factional alignment is.
That is such great role-playing. And that split-second, character-driven decision pays off massively for them. Because Sakura took the hit to protect her, the captain realizes these players aren't the enemy. So she hands Sakura a highly classified data cube and orders the party to flee to a shuttle on the landing pad, while she and her surviving Navy personnel basically hold the line against the assassins.
It's a phenomenal reward for staying true to the character's psychology, rather than just playing optimally, The data cube is the ultimate prize here. But escaping with it means transitioning from a ground-based firefight into a really desperate orbital escape.
Right, because escaping the gravity well with that data cube meant they survived the bureaucracy, sure, but it immediately exposed them to the physics of an orbital blockade. They steal a naval shuttle, which they hilariously dub the disposable wreck, and they punch it into the atmosphere.
That's a great name for a ship.
I know, right? And this is where Ruki's veteran scout skills finally come into play. He jumps into the pilot seat and starts pulling these crazy evasive maneuvers against incoming missiles, while Leonardo mans the ship's pulse lasers.
And this is where the mechanics of the Traveler system really shine for the listeners who might be familiar with it. Leonardo fires the pulse lasers, and he doesn't just hit the pursuing gunship. The GM notes he scores an effect 6+ critical hit.
Yeah, we should definitely unpack that, because in Traveler, it's not just a binary pass or fail system. The margin of success actually matters. So when you roll the dice, anything above the target number is your effect. An effect of 1 or 2 is a solid hit, but an effect of 6 or higher is an extraordinary, mathematically improbable level of success.
That's huge.
Yeah. In the fiction of the game, that translates to Leonardo surgically dismantling the pursuing gunship with terrifying precision.
And while that tactical space combat is resolving, Sakura is up in the co-pilot seat, utilizing the prize they just bled for. She plugs that data cube into the shuttle's comms array and transmits an Imperial Grace code.
What exactly does that code do?
It is a highly classified cryptographic handshake. It essentially blinds the planetary blockade to their specific transponder, which allows them to just slip right through the net.
Wow. But of course the tension doesn't drop there, because while they're pulling these high-G evasive maneuvers and slicing through the blockade, there is a horrifying medical emergency unfolding in the back of the cabin.
Right, the injuries from the escape.
Yeah, Milton took severe rifle fire during the escape from the building. He is unconscious, he's bleeding out. So Sakura, our influencer and MMA fighter, has to perform emergency space surgery using only local anesthetic and a civilian tech level 12 med kit.
Talk about high stakes. And while she is patching up his gunshot wounds, she finds something that completely alters the trajectory of the entire campaign. She discovers a Tech Level 14 tracking device embedded directly into Milton's spine.
Oh man, and this is where Milton's missing digital footprint suddenly makes perfect sense. Milton isn't just a merchant. His background reveals he's from a place called Panopticon, which is a secret orbital station entirely run by a rogue AI named Bob.
Gotta love the name Bob for a rogue AI.
It's so unassuming. But Milton is a Black Project science experiment. He didn't even know his true origins until very recently. He's been monitored every single second of his life.
And Sakura manages to cut the tracker out of his spine, and the party immediately smashes it to pieces.
Which I actually think smashing that tracker was a terrible tactical error by the
I
player.
do think so.
I do. I mean, yes, it feels good in the moment, obviously. But think about the consequences. Doesn't destroying the tracker instantly alert this super intelligent AI gob that his highly valuable asset is now self-aware and completely off the grid? They essentially traded a hidden leash for a giant neon crosshair on their backs.
You know, I see that a bit differently. Tactically, you might be right that it alerts the AI. But psychologically, it was really the only choice the characters could make in that moment. Smashing the tracker provides this immediate, visceral autonomy. It permanently crosses a Rubicon for Milton.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, he transitions in that exact moment from being a passively monitored asset to a hunted fugitive, yes, but he is finally free. The AI knows he's awake now. There's no going back to pretending to be a simple space merchant. It forces the character to engage with the active plot.
I guess that's the beauty of tabletop RPGs, right? Suboptimal tactical choices often make for the absolute best narrative beats. And speaking of the active plot, having finally evaded the blockade, destroyed the tracker, and gone totally dark, the crew finally gets a moment to breathe. They sit down in the dim light of the cabin and actually look at the contents of this data cube the captain gave them.
The decryption of this cube is where the true terrifying scope of the campaign is laid bare for everyone at the table. The data is heavily fragmented, sure, but it explicitly outlines an overarching algorithm called the Panopticon convergence model.
And the Imperial intelligence notes on this cube are tracking 4 specific mathematical vectors that just happen to match our party perfectly. Vector 1 is a scout service number, and that's Rookie. Vector 2 is a civilian trader, that's Milton. Vector 3 is a noble access key, Sakura. And Vector 4 is a lab clearance tab.
It shows the AI hasn't just been watching them, it has been modeling their behavior this whole time. But the most shocking revelation on the data cube is the definition of a convergence event. The Imperial analytics define this event as the exact moment when mana and reality come together.
Okay, that one word completely flips the script of the entire game. We've been dealing with incredibly hard sci-fi this whole time, right? Tech level 15 genetics, orbital blockades, pulse lasers, rogue AIs, and suddenly, buried in a top-secret Imperial data drive, is the word mana. Magic.
It is a massive genre collision. The campaign is setting up a fundamental conflict between the cold, hard, empirical science of the Imperium and these anomalous, possibly magical forces. And the player characters aren't just caught in the crossfire here. They have been unknowingly mapped out by this AI as the exact variables required to trigger this metaphysical event.
Which brings us to the biggest bombshell in the transcript, I think. The data explicitly names Leonardo. It designates him as a non-vector, but labels his specific role in this cluster as the catalyst.
The implications of that single word are just staggering. Leonardo, a man engineered by a Black Project to be the pinnacle of logic, efficiency, and espionage, is somehow the key to triggering an event involving magic.
It gives you chills when you think about the sheer scale of the orchestration. So the deep dive for Session 1 wraps up with our battered, bleeding party arriving at a location known as the Shadow Docks. It's hidden in a Lagrange point, just this massive, lawless ecosystem of scrapped ships, condemned platforms, and a shadow economy.
It's quite a change of scenery.
Yeah, they trade the high-tech, lethal terrors of the Jewell blockade for the gritty, anonymous comfort of a scrap station and, like, a bowl of sketchy stew.
It serves as a perfect thematic conclusion to the session, really. They started trying to bluff their way through pristine, high-tech imperial bureaucracy in these crisp uniforms, and they end up hiding in the rusted, overlooked trash of the galaxy, covered in their own blood. Session 1 perfectly established the stakes. We watched these public personas completely shattered to reveal the lethal, traumatized operatives hiding underneath.
And it was all catalyzed by a game master who expertly used a single failed bluff with some analog tablets at a security checkpoint to launch a massive system-wide conspiracy. It really highlights how in a great game actions have immediate, terrifying consequences, and, you know, every secret you write into your backstory is an eventual liability.
It absolutely demonstrates the power of collaborative storytelling. The GM built the world, but the player's psychologies armed the bomb.
So true. As we wrap up this analysis, I want to leave you listeners with a final, lingering question to mull over on your own. We know the data cube defines a convergence as mana and reality coming together, but it specifically calls Leonardo a man genetically engineered by a high-tech black project to be perfectly logical, emotionless, and grounded entirely in reality. It calls him the catalyst.
An anomaly within the data.
Exactly. If you were a road AI and you wanted to merge unpredictable, rule-breaking magic with the rigid physical world, why would your prime ingredient be the ultimate man of science? What exactly is hidden deep in Leonardo's suppressed, genetically modified memories that makes him the spark for this cosmic powder keg?
That is the mystery that will undoubtedly drive every paranoid decision they make moving forward.
Thank you so much for taking this deep dive into the Spinward marches with us today. Keep asking questions, keep looking past the disguises, and as always, stay curious. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is put on a fake uniform and pretend you belong. We'll catch you next time.